Welcome to the Friday Fundamental Show, where we go deep on deep topics. Episode 3, Listening.
With your host, Reed Dennis and Gracelyn Glazier of Fire Up Nation.
Fire Up Nation! TGIF, happy Friday, Feliz Viernes, and welcome to the Friday Fundamental Show, where we go deep on deep topics. We're your hosts, Gracelyn Glazier and Reed Dennis of Fire Up Nation, and this is our Week 3 episode, where we are diving deep on listening. Now, Gracelyn, this is a topic that, I was a little hesitant to do because...
You're saying you haven't quite mastered it yet.
I do not have a level of mastery in listening. I'm just going to be up front with you guys. Gracelyn can attest. And we do feel like it's a hugely important topic. One, worthy of following, love, which we discussed in Week 1, and then vision in Week 2. So really powerful, first 2 weeks topics. And now we're talking about listening. So why is listening so important?
Listening is hugely important. You think about it's really a part of, I think, our day-to-day lives. And right now it does feel to me like a lot of people out there in the world are speaking to be heard and not necessarily like listening to hear what the other person's actually putting out there. So I think it's a really powerful topic to dive deep on and perhaps see new perspectives.
Ooh.
Hear new perspectives, I should
Hear
say.
new perspectives and see some new perspectives. And I'm, hoping to pick up some new perspectives for myself. This has been a fun topic to dive deep on. Just a little outline here. For our show today, we're about to do our hot minute take with both Gracelyn and me on listening. Then we're going to turn listening inside out. We've got a really awesome guest today, John Von Runnen of the Deo Group, best listener we know. So excited to get his wisdom. And then, of course, we'll come back and give you the fundamental 5. So stay tuned.
All right, next up, Reed's going to give us his take on listening in a hot minute. Reed, are you ready?
What?
Are you ready for your hot take on listening?
Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah, let's do it.
Lord help us. All right, Reed's take on listening in a hot minute. Here we go.
It's not about you. That's what I have to tell myself when I want to listen consciously and really be present to the conversation, not to be holding judgment from the past or bringing in something that's in my head. Listening is very much about being in your heart, being in an open heart, having a clear mind. You're coming with the context of, I'm not listening for what's wrong, I'm listening for what's right. I'm listening for, with the operative word there being for, right? How do I build upon this conversation? How do I add value to it? What is this person trying to tell me? Don't look at the finger, look at where the finger's pointing. And with listening, it's not just about the words, but it's about all of it, just like really trying to feel the other person, trying to get in their heart and their heart's perspective so that we can really connect and I can then really absorb what you're saying.
Listening is the opportunity for deep connection. If you show up to a conversation with an open heart and a clear mind with no expectations or judgment, then just imagine the beauty that can be created from it. I think the biggest takeaway for me with listening is so often we have this internal dialogue going on within our heads of either, past conversations with this person, or we hear them say a word and it takes us to where we think the conversation's going. And we're now out of the present moment and have created this whole new world within the conversation. And imagine what is possible if we're fully present and can listen to what the person's pointing to, listen to what's coming from their heart. Maybe they're talking around something, but they're really at the core of it is what their heart's trying to express. And I think it's so beautiful and so powerful that we have the opportunity to connect with people on such a deep level if we'll just use our 2 ears to listen and use our mouth a little bit less to prove.
If you're just now joining us, this is the Friday Fundamental Show. with Graceland and Reed of Fire Up Nation. And this week's episode is diving deep on listening. And we're about to turn listening inside out. That's where we take the outside world's perspective on listening and kind of sum that up. And then we, flip that and shift to, how do we feel about listening coming from the inside out, right? Kind of your head's view versus your heart's view on listening. So Graceland, with that context, and I know we both kind of mentioned in the hot minute that really good listening involves having a clear mind and an open heart. So maybe we should just start there and just let's go with the outside perspective first. And what I'd like your take on is, how do you see like most people listening or maybe not listening?
Yeah, I think from my experience, a lot of people, including myself sometimes, listen with the intention of responding or, sharing their own perspectives. Even as someone, begins a conversation, you're listening for how am I going to respond, or what is it that I'm going to add to this that's my own perspective. And I think actually taking it from a completely different standpoint is listening to hear the value what somebody else is saying, listening for the gold that's coming out of their thoughts and perspectives. It's not necessarily about agreeing with the person. It's just seeking first to understand, and then from there you can build or create something together. Maybe you uncover a different perspective that you weren't aware of. But I think that's pretty powerful to look at listening from that side of things.
So seek first to understand, then to be understood.
Yes.
In that order, importantly, right?
Very important. Very important.
Well, that's cool. I can draw from some of our own personal experiences because I know we told you guys. I mean, I'm not the best listener, and maybe you can kind of give some color on that. What is it about me in the past? I'm working on it.
I'm working on it. For all.
Right. I'm working on becoming a better listener. What did I used to do that I still do that you don't consider to be, like listening to you, and just kind of paint a picture of how you see it showing up just in our relationship.
Yes, and I've seen a lot of growth in this area, so I appreciate that, and thank you for doing better at listening. But
thank you for that acknowledgement. I'm going to take that while I get it, guys.
Yeah, I would say my experience of your listening in the past is somebody that's not fully present. Like even just you think about listening as being, it's not just what they're saying, it's body language, etc. So, but in a conversation with you, even if I'm the one speaking, I feel like I'm listening to the demeanor you're giving off. Like, are you fully here? Can you actually know what I'm saying? Or sometimes people just feel aloof when they're listening because you can tell their wheels are spinning. Maybe within their own head. And so I think that used to be my experience in conversations, was often feeling like you were looking to be able to respond based off of where you were at versus first seeking to understand. So maybe that's why I'm fairly sensitive to that part of listening. But now I hear you asking more questions, trying to understand the perspective of where I'm at, where other people are at. And I see the value in the questions that you ask. It is really drawing that out. It's trying to figure out the goal, trying to see the person's perspective. So it's been really nice.
Well, I'm happy to hear that. And on that note of, asking questions, that's me seeking clarification, actually showing you that I'm listening, and I'm listening to hear, right? Because I want to understand where you're coming from versus just being so caught up in my head and what I want to say, and kind of like that control and significance that I used to fight for in a conversation. Now I really am interested in building on it.
That's a huge part of it.
Yeah, and because I know that you have really great stuff to offer, and I want to explore the possibilities. What I noticed in all of that is if I was interrupting.
How could I have forgotten?
which I still do, by the way. And well, just more, just like it's about me, right? I've learned it's not about you guys. It really isn't about you. Listening is about us, right? It's seeking that deeper connection, and it's really trying to feel the heart. It's the notion of don't look at the finger, look at where the finger's pointing, right? So we do this with words, we do it just with our body language and our tone, and really the whole of it, right? And in kind of listening for wrong, right? If that's your context, instead of listening for right, like what's right with this? So the way that I think about that is, am I listening from judgment, or am I listening from love?
Yeah.
And I think that that's just a really powerful way to kind of distinguish between, what I see most people doing, because I've been doing it my whole life, where you're kind of caught in your head, you're caught in judgment, versus then listening from your heart. So help me kind of understand, because I feel like that's where the inside out is with listening. What does it mean to listen from your heart?
For some reason, as soon as you said that, I thought of the song "Listen to Your Heart," but it's not from your heart; it's to your heart. So
Graceland is singing now. Look at this, guys! We are making some progress. This is awesome.
Oh, I actually love that song.
Listen to your heart.
I remember it from high school.
I love it.
Okay, so your question is, though, how do you listen to your heart?
Listen. Well, I was asking, how do you listen from your heart? So I guess I'm still in the topic of listening, where it's an interaction amongst other people. So how do you bring that to the table? How do you bring in your heart, like an open heart, into a conversation? And just what does that look like?
I really feel like it goes back to some of the things we talked to with love, coming from love, being love. So if you see that, you are in somebody else, like you see that we're all connected, then I think that when it comes to listening from your heart, it's just being open and seeing the value and the gold in what they're saying. It's recognizing that, even if you work together to get to some different conclusion or destination, that it doesn't really matter necessarily the words that are coming out of their mouth. It's like they're sharing from their heart, either their experience, their thoughts, their emotions, their feelings. So listening with your heart is listening for all of that, not just they're telling me to do this, or this is what their words are speaking to. So I think it's just dropping everything that has to do with you and listening for what's inside of them that's coming out through their words.
Ooh, nice. And you kind of hit on a word that I thought you were talking around, because you said it inside, like listening for what's inside of them. And so it's a deeper level, right? Like true listening is not at the surface of just, like, oh, what are their words, and let me analyze that, and let me come up with a rebuttal. And I mean, you can even like close your eyes. I often do this now because I feel like it helps me actually get into my heart, which, if I'm really trying to receive what somebody's saying to me, just to kind of take it all in, right? Absorb it. It's like being out in nature and you just close your eyes and you just hear all the beautiful sounds around you. I mean, you just, you feel one with it. You feel more connected to it. I feel like listening is a similar parallel there.
Yeah, I like the contrast that you made with being in your head. It's like that's very analytical, and you're judging, you're trying to attach meaning to something, whereas if it's with your heart, you're just it's like an experience. And I think we've touched on this, but it's active. You have to, sometimes you catch yourself swinging off course, you're with this little internal monologue, but with your heart, you're fully feeling and going through the experience and actually being fully present too.
Nice, yeah. And on that active note, so listening is like a real activity, and it requires, some consciousness that you bring to the table. Because if you're just passive in your listening, or you're not present, meaning you're kind of in the past and you're bringing something up from there, or you're thinking about what you want to say, about what you want to say next, right? So you're kind of in the future or the past, and you're not in the present moment. That's really taking you away from like all of the possibilities in the present. The present's the gift.
I love that.
Right. So I mean, that's all great. What do you think like is the big lesson here? I mean, what are you seeing kind of on the outside that really people are or are not doing with listening, that you just kind of like say, you know what, I wish people did more of this when it comes to listening?
Yeah, the first thing that comes to mind is I feel like you see this like the talk shows or just, I don't know, my experience of what I like consume as far as what other people are putting out there. Well, it's not just the news, but it's just like, I don't know, the mainstream, whatever, is a lot of like speaking, but like you're wanting to get somebody to experience it exactly as you are. They have to think the way that you do, feel the way that you do, or else like they suck, you know? And I just don't feel like that's what listening is about, because you're coming to it expecting only one outcome, and then you're not really open to possibilities or opportunity to understand things in a different way. So I think that's like the divisiveness that we see, the angst that we see, just all the negativity around communicating, and the listen. I feel that way that comes into with listening is it's like people are speaking from a place that they need you to come out the other side as they have, you know. And I think that really what I would challenge for those people is recognize that you know, getting on the other side of what you think you know is actually really beautiful, because you actually can accept that there are different ways to look at it. It doesn't mean you change your mind, but you could. And if you're not willing to go there, then you're going to be stuck in the same place. And that ain't cool. I don't know. I like listening and you know, hearing new perspectives and trying it on, as I've heard it said around here. Consider it.
I like a lot of what you said about that, and you know, some of just the ways that's been showing up. I'll just share that real quick. You know, when we're doing interviews with people, and you know, they're like, "Okay, we're gonna ask you the question, and then you have 3 sentences to respond." And I'm like, "Well, how are we gonna get any depth? Like, how are you gonna get the gold that I have inside here to give to you if I'm only able to keep it at a certain surface level?" And I feel like, you know, that's really what listening is about, is getting to that depth. And
Yep.
You have to kind of allow it to happen, because it's not like just in you know, a few words everybody's going to be able to express what they really feel. And that's I think the key is to feel the feelings, right? Feel your feelings fully.
Tongue twister.
It is, and it's hugely important. I mean, it's okay to, you know, to feel. And it's something that I feel like, you know, is missing a lot in our communications, and even with ourselves. You know, we just kind of suppress things, emotions, and stack them down, and then it ends up showing up in not listening, really. Whereas if we, you know, if we're able to kind of allow each other the time and the kind of attention and the awareness, we can really help each other to bring out our gifts, to bring out, you know, what's actually in our hearts, to find the gold, and see yourself in the situation, which is really powerful for, you know, your own growth, and also powerful because it's allowing somebody else to express what's truly in their hearts. So that's cool.
I love that. I have a final question for you.
Okay.
As somebody that I think has really personally taken listening inside out, and you've kind of switched up the way that you approach listening. Like, take us on that journey a little bit, and what advice would you give somebody maybe like take an assessment of where they're at with listening and see the opportunities that lie in changing things up?
Well, the journey starts with I wasn't listening. I mean, I wasn't. I don't think I was aware that I wasn't doing it, but I really wasn't doing it. And what it looked like was, you know, I was in judgment a lot. I was easily triggered. Like, you know, my emotions would just kind of come to the table, and it would look more like an offensive attack, where, you know, people couldn't even get their thoughts out, or their you know, their 2 cents in. And then I'd be wanting to direct it in another way. So, I mean, it can look a lot of different ways. Some people are just aloof and passive. I've been that way as well. So, you know, the journey through that really has been around really keeping my mouth shut. I mean,
2 ears, one mouth.
Yes,
right?
You have 2 ears and one mouth for a reason. And when I say keeping my mouth shut, it means don't say my say. Just, you know, speak powerfully, right? Like say your say to be heard, and then also like listen to hear. And so listening to hear requires all the things that we've been talking about in this inside out segment. I mean, it's active, it's participating in it, it's being conscious of what's going on and having that awareness. It's really like receiving the gold and allowing that to uncover. And probably the most important thing, and this is really where I've grown a lot, is asking the questions. Like as we're moving through a conversation, instead of trying to take it where I want it to go, it's actually building on it by asking clarifying questions, asking questions to make sure that I confirm my understanding. If I notice something that you said that I think is really powerful or that you're trying to address, I can ask questions to help you uncover it, right? So it's really an empowering position, and one where I'm adding and building up the conversation versus tearing it down and diminishing it.
I love that. And you perfectly segued us to our next segment of our questions, the questions you can ask yourself in regards to listening to really get a pulse on the type of listener that you are. So up next, we'll be sharing our fundamental questions on listening. We'll be back.
You're watching the Friday Fundamental Show with Fire Up Nation. At Fire Up Nation, we're all about igniting the human spirit and empowering others to live in love and not fear. We help people liberate from the boxes that they put themselves in, invigorate, fire up from the inside out, and elevate their life and the lives around them. Please come join our community if you're about spreading light and love in the world. You can join our Facebook group. You can go to bigadventureliving.com and sign up to be a part of the community. We look forward to being a part of your journey and you a part of ours. Welcome back to the Friday Fundamental Show, where we are going deep on listening. And it's time for the fundamental questions around listening. Now, these are the questions that you could ask yourself to uncover, a higher perspective, one that comes from within you on listening. So are you ready to rock?
I'm ready.
All right.
All right. Question number 1. Am I making this about me? How would you unpack that for us, Reed?
I don't know. Are you? I mean, you have to have some awareness if you take a conversation with somebody and you're really only contributing your own perspective and you're not really asking them questions or getting engaged with them on meeting them at their level, right? If you're coming in and being kind of hijacked in your head around what you want to say next or something that happened at a other time that's not the present moment, then that is putting your own judgment on it, and that is making the conversation about you.
Dang, sure is.
All right, question number 2. Am I in my head or am I in my heart? What does that mean to you?
Yeah, I think that oftentimes our head wants to put things in a box or kind of give it a label based off of, I don't know, ways that we can associate with the topic or what's going on. So it's very easy to like kind of compartmentalize or try to put it in a box. Whereas if you're coming from your heart and you're in your heart, then you're really centered in love, and which is very different. There's no box for love. It's free flowing, given out freely. So I think there's a very stark difference. So a good way is to take an assessment. Are you in your head? Or are you in your heart?
In real time.
In real time. All right, question number 3. Am I looking for what is right or am I looking for what's wrong?
All right, so that's a question just to ask yourself about how you're entering into an interaction, not only with somebody else, but also with yourself, right? If you're listening to your heart, I mean, are you coming in just, is the world happening to you or is the world happening for you, right? So this is a question around context, and it's one that you can ask yourself before you engage with somebody to just kind of get your perspective coming from love, right? And around your heart versus being in your head and in judgment. And so, looking for what's right is just kind of that abundance mindset that hey, I'm actually gonna take this somewhere. I'm gonna add some value. I'm gonna really hear, right? Listen to hear and see where I can contribute versus if you're looking for what's wrong right off the bat, then you're just at a surface level. You're never going to get the depth, and you're probably going to be making it about you. instead of being the contribution and the builder to the conversation.
Nice.
All right, question number 4. Did I understand that? Did I have that right? Or do I need some more clarification?
Yeah, so that's a great question to ask yourself. And if you're confused, a great thing to do is check in, get a pulse on the conversation. Even if you think that you understand it, it might be good. Hey, what I'm hearing is this, or my takeaway of what you're saying is, and say, is that correct? Am I taking away the right things? And then if there's a misunderstanding, it's easy enough to clear up because you're seeking to get an understanding. So
nice. And finally, I'm going to ask the last one to you. What are they pointing to?
That's good. Yeah, as a listener, I think the experience sometimes is people are talking about what they're talking about, but maybe it's a little bit of a dance. They're not getting to the thing, but maybe they're looking for the words or trying to express the emotions. So what are they pointing to? It's like taking what maybe is unsaid or kind of piecing together all of the different aspects of the conversation to say like, this is the gold. This is what is at the meat of what I'm hearing from you. So I think that's good to figure out.
Awesome. Well, there you have it, guys. Those are the fundamental questions that you can ask yourself regarding listening, and ask yourself, then ask again. The more you ask, the deeper you go, and the more the answers will present. These are the fundamental questions on listening. Pull out your phone, take a picture, or take a screenshot. Welcome back to the Friday Fundamental Show. This is our week 3 episode, and we're diving deep on listening. Our guest this week is John Von Runnen, and this is a man of many talents and a guy that you just can't help but want to be like. John is pastor of his church. He's a father of 4. He and his wife Christy, they own a cheer gym that's nationally renowned in Wiley, Texas. There, he's the founder and owner of the Deo Group web development company that's also a national brand. And you're a fish tank aficionado, a new enthusiast of scuba diving and adventure.
Yes.
Oh man, I don't even know. I could go on and on and on. Maybe most importantly, you're my brother. John here is my stepbrother, and you are perhaps the best listener that we know. So when we knew that listening was our topic for week 3, we naturally thought of you, John. So welcome to the Friday Fundamental Show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. This is really exciting. I follow you guys very closely, very interested in what you're doing and in your life just in general, and care about you both tremendously. So this is a real joy for me to get to be a part of this.
Well, awesome. It is for us too. So let's just dive right in, John. So, you hear the word listening. I mean, that probably brings up kind of certain things for you. So let's just start there. Let's say, hey, what are the kind of things that get brought up in your heart and mind when you hear the word listening?
Yeah. So I think 2 of the kind of very first things that come to mind when I think about that word, and I think about my responsibility in a relationship or even just in a conversation of being a good listener, is just having a genuine care and concern, first for the people that I'm talking to, but then also just for the situation at hand, whether that's thinking about other people and what they might be going through, or trying to understand where somebody is trying to tell me something or get me to see a certain thing. But even just in my life, when I think about listening, you mentioned I'm a pastor of a small undenominated Christian church here in Wiley, and for me, even just being able to listen to God and listen to the Holy Spirit as I believe He directs me, just trying to really understand and care for and have a concern for whatever message is coming to me. So, so when I'm talking to you guys about all the great things that you're doing. I really care about that. And it goes back to a care that I just have for both of you as individuals. And that, if you want to zoom out even further, is connected to a care that I have just for God's creation in general. So yeah, when I was just thinking about, or as I think about what that means for me to be an active listener, and we'll talk more about that later, but just that term really sticks to me. What does it mean to be an active listener? Well, it means that I care for the person I'm talking to. It means that I care about my situation. I think it means a lot of that. And unfortunately, our culture has really turned to a very different stance when it comes to listening or being involved in conversation. You'll notice there's just a lot of shouting that happens. I feel like it's a lost art to just be able to sit and do this, and have a conversation. And maybe we even disagree about some things, but that doesn't mean we have to not like each other or put the other person down or whatever. And again, you see so much in our culture where people turn to aggression and volume to try and be heard. And if you've reached that point, you've really missed a lot of what's going to bring value to a conversation. So, and again, ultimately for me, that just goes back to having a genuine care and concern for the people or the situation that I'm dealing with.
I love that. And what I heard in that, we actually were having a conversation earlier this morning about really listening is showing up with an open heart.
Yeah.
And what you said, it's like there's no judgment and I don't feel that in my conversations with you, as far as like you feel like you show up fully open-hearted and the conversation isn't meant to be taken like, okay, well, we're trying to get to an end game of like one of us agrees or disagree. It's open how the conversation goes, but it's just free flowing. And I really value that in our conversations. But what would you say are your kind of tricks of the trade if you were to boil it down to, how somebody that maybe they recognize, hey, I don't listen really well. I catch myself being, aloof during conversations. I'm not really present. What would you say are kind of 3 or however many you can think of takeaways for really being a good listener?
Well, I think it starts maybe with just asking yourself a personal question of, do people think I'm a good listener? And being willing to really consider that, maybe even taking that a step further and going to a colleague or your spouse or whoever you're in conversation with and asking them, do you think I'm a good listener? And there's another thing that's important here is to be willing to hear what they have to say, even if it's not what you think. So a lot of people won't engage in conversations with other people because of the way that they think they're going to respond. And so if I go to my wife and say, hey, do you think I'm a good listener? And she says, well, honestly, over the past few months, I really feel like you've not been listening to me at all. And I get all mad and blow up. Is she really going to want to come and ask, or is she really going to want to answer that question honestly again? Absolutely not. I think it's the same in the workplace. If one of your coworkers approaches you and you don't agree and you're immediately volume elevated, an aggressive body posture, things like that, people aren't going to want to talk to you. And so I think it starts. I really appreciate what you said in that question of just, asking or thinking about, just that question of, am I a good listener? And starting there, I think that's really big. And then I also think it's really being able to self-reflect and ask if you're being selfless or not when you enter into conversations. Because so many times people enter into conversations with an agenda. They have things that they're trying to get across or trying to do. And innately, I believe you're being selfish when you're doing that. Now, not all selfishness is bad, and that's a whole nother conversation. So I'm not just trying to say that people who are taking a certain approach as they enter a conversation are in a bad spot, but if you want to have the kind of productive and fruitful conversations that lead to change or lead to a deepening of knowledge or lead to all these other really positive things, and you need to approach it with a real selfless heart. You need to approach it with this idea that I might be wrong, or at the very least, I may not know everything about whatever topic it is, or maybe I've got a blind spot. A lot of times people don't realize they just may have a blind spot about a certain topic, and we need people to help us understand that. None of us has all of that information. So that's a few things that I think of when I think about qualities or actions that make someone a good listener.
And I heard a lot of great things in what you said, and also want to just kind of take it one step further. So you're in the conversation, and you said a lot of like the context of how you're entering into a conversation and where you're coming from and considering the other person, and where like and what's kind of happened in maybe past interactions, and that sets the stage. So let's just say we're in a conversation. I mean, I've noticed that you have a few things that you do that really help to drive it forward and build it, right? Versus diminish it or try to cut it down. Because you basically touched on, you're not putting your own judgment in an interaction. You're in fact like consciously aware of where the other person's coming from and where you might take it, right? Like meaning where you can build and make it better. And so I'll kind of point you in the direction of just something I've noticed with you. But one thing is you ask questions, and maybe you can just kind of walk us through some of the tricks of the listening trade, John. Just like what you do in an active conversation. You mentioned active listening to just kind of help make sure that you're grounded and that you're building the conversation forward.
Yeah, I think again, kind of going back to this idea that that I don't have all the answers. I don't have all the information. I think another thing here that I've just thought of just now is that I like to try and find things that I can unite with people on. So there's plenty of things that we can easily identify that we don't see eye to eye on, right? I mean, we're just different people. God made us all very different, and I think it's in those differences that you see the fullness of God's image. And I think just trying to look for common ground. I think people appreciate when you say things like, I can see where you're coming from on that. I think people appreciate when you say things like, I've never thought about it like that. And it's just these engaging, unifying type statements that are really good tools to bring people together. We don't need any help dividing. I mean, you just look across the landscape of our world at this time, and there's just so much division, and I think it breaks God's heart that his children are divided like that, and instead of really loving each other and caring about each other, as I've heard in a lot of the things that you guys have talked about, and really appreciate your approach on that. I just think it's a matter of trying to find the common ground and help people see that you care, that you might be willing to think of things in a different way. So yeah, those are another couple of things that kind of pop into mind.
Nice.
I hear I don't know if you've heard the analogy of like the 6 and the 9, although that's actually like looking at it, but this idea of people, you start a conversation typically from your own viewpoint, right? And so from where you're talking about where you're looking at, if it's a 6 on the ground, you're like, oh, it's definitely a 6, you're talking from that space. Wow. And in conversation, if the person on the other side sees it as a 9, rather than just, staying firm on that, it's walking them around in a conversation and saying, oh, I totally see what you're saying. This is what I'm getting from what you're saying, but let me walk you over here. And, from this vantage point, maybe it's this way. And so I can see the power of doing that with your words too. And, people do like to feel heard too. So just kind of meeting them where they're at doesn't mean you have to say, I completely changed my mind, but that's really powerful to just recognize we can all have our own individual thoughts as well. So
I love that. And no, I have not ever heard that, but I will indeed be using that in my conversations and in my sermons going forward. That is a fantastic analogy. I really like that.
great.
And one thing, John, just to piggyback on that, also, in you're talking about, just making sure that you're hearing the other person and taking them at face value, right? Like, don't look at the finger, look at where the finger's pointing, kind of thing. And I notice with you and just your engagement, you're a very active listener, which I do want to touch on that and just kind of get your take on what that means to you. And one other thing that you do is you ask questions as you make your way through the conversation, and it's either to reinforce your own understanding or because something was said that took things in a different direction, and you are genuinely, interested. And so you kind of, you don't have parameters around how you're listening, and you're also kind of listening for the gold, or you're listening, for the other person's heart and kind of what they're really wanting to contribute. And I just find that so powerful. So like, how does that work when we're having a conversation and something maybe for our listeners to adapt, to embrace and apply to their own life? When you're in a conversation, instead of like kind of rushing to judgment and losing, yourself being present, you can ask a question or get some clarification. Just can you speak to some of those things that you can do?
Sure. Yeah. So I think people approach conversations in a couple of different ways. They approach it with their thoughts and feelings already wrapped up and set, or they approach it with, like we talked about, an open mind and a willingness to consider where other people are coming from. And I've seen this in my marriage a lot over the last 25 plus years, that if I go into conversations with a set way of, I think, Christy was doing something or said something, and it's all wrapped up in my mind, then I often leave the conversation, realizing that I never even considered what she was thinking or what she was talking about. And there's in Stephen Covey's book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, number 5 in that list just says, seek first to understand and then to be understood. And when Christy and I started doing that in our marriage, I think it took us probably 15 or 17 years to really get to this point and actively practice it. Things really changed for us in our conflict. Marriages are going to have conflict. Relationships are going to have conflict. And I don't think that's bad. It's just not. We view conflict as, oh, well, it's terrible and it's not good. No, conflict is actually very healthy. And you can see that in corporate teams that work together. Often the ones that are most productive and get the most done are ones where they can mix it up. They can disagree on things and try and view each other's point and come to a conclusion after all of the information is on the table. Well, again, if you go into it not allowing anything to be put on the table other than your thoughts and your feelings, again, whether it's in a corporate setting or in your personal setting, you're going to be very limited in the type of outcome. And usually the outcome is going to be very negative if that's your approach. So yeah, I think engaging, being an active listener and really thinking through the things in the moment that are said. If you said X, Y, Z, and it immediately pops in my mind, well, what about this? Then I can have a follow-on conversation to more fully understand you, or to really try and see where you are, where you're going with that. So yeah.
Yeah, and I want to go back because you started to touch on this between you and Christy, because
Yeah.
we're a couple. We respect you and Christy so much as individual people, and together we love y'all. And I'm not mistaken, you counsel young kids, adults, and people that are entering into the marriage phase of their life. So what do you see between maybe couples specifically as being one of the biggest challenges around communication and listening, and what advice would you give on that?
Yeah. So a scripture comes to mind that just says something to the effect of, be quick to listen and slow to speak. And then it also goes on to say, be slow to anger. But if you just focus kind of on those first two things, be quick to listen and slow to speak. Well, naturally, I think we're just the opposite of that. We're quick to speak and slow to listen. And that hurts us. It just does. It hurts in so many different ways. And again, I think it's about a posture. I think it's about a way that you view yourself, the way you view yourself in relation to the person you're having a conversation with. And are you taking more of a power over approach in those types of conversations and environments, or are you taking more of a power under approach? And they're two very different things. Again, in a power over approach, I'm going to make sure that, my way is the way that people think, or that, whatever. But in a power under approach, I'm going to support, I'm going to engage, I'm going to help grow, to help build structure, because we all know the storms of life are coming. They just are. They're coming. And some of those could be, little rain showers, and some of them could be F5 tornadoes, and we just don't know what's going to hit. And so if in our lives, we're constantly building foundation and structure, again, through what I'm just calling a power under approach, then when those storms come and hit, the foundation is there and it's sturdy and it can withhold or stand up to, those storms of life that are coming. So with young couples, we really try and help them think through things like, don't make a mountain out of a molehill. I mean, that's just a real basic one, because Christy and I could get mad at each other all day long for things that we said, things that we do. I mean, we just could, because we're two imperfect people. Christy speaks to this a lot in our pre-engagement and pre-marriage counseling with couples, is you have to decide, like, is that worth getting upset about? Because sometimes it is. Sometimes it's worth, engaging and going deeper on something, but a lot of times it's just not. And would you rather live with somebody who's your biggest critic, or would you rather live with somebody who's your biggest fan? Well, if you're the biggest fan for somebody, you're not pointing out all those little things. I love watching the Dallas Mavericks. I could, go watch them all week long. They do a whole lot of things wrong, but as a fan, I tend to just kind of skip over those things. I like thinking about all the things they're doing great. Well, I mean, it's the same thing in our relationships. It's the same thing in our conversations. Be quick to listen and slow to speak. Really take it from an approach that you're trying to support and build something, and not constantly always trying to tear it down.
I love that. Yeah, you're expressing just like the foundation of coming into it, and it's kind of like stop looking for what's wrong, right? Or stop listening for what's wrong, and instead try to hear what's right. And if you come in with just
Absolutely.
That context, right? It's kind of a context for listening and a perspective. Just you're actually getting out of your head and you're getting into your heart. And then with an open heart, I mean, you don't know what your highest self, what the possibilities are, right? We don't know God's plan. Like, so in a conversation, if you're listening to build, then I mean, you can really get all the gifts. Otherwise, if you're coming in your head and you're not, you're looking to diminish, or you're just not in that place of love, then you just may tear down something great. So that's really powerful. Thank you for sharing that. Let's go to some of the pitfalls though that people fall in, because we're talking about all like the positives and how to be a good listener. I mean, what do you see as what's happening more often? I think in your very first kind of share or answer was some of the things that society is kind of we'll say devolved into, and there's a lot of shouting and a lot of aggression, and maybe what bad listening looks like, so some people can get some awareness in the moment around, wait, am I kind of hijacked in the conversation here? Am I really like have I lost the building of it, and instead now I'm tearing it down? Just so what are some of the things that you see that are most common?
I think this may be an oversimplification, and I apologize if it is, but I feel like it's engaging both parts of your brain, right? We have two halves to our brain. We have the right half, which is kind of the seat of emotion, and that's where a lot of those feelings take place. And then we have the left half, which is the seat of logic, where our brain can kind of go back and forth and think through things. And I think it's a matter of really engaging both parts of your brain. And usually, if we're if we're entering into a conversation or in the midst of a conversation and it starts going bad, we might be overly engaged in one part of our brain. You know, we might be thinking of it too logically and not having empathy for, you know, the people that we're talking to. Or on the other side, we can definitely get way too emotional in conversations, and you know, we begin making everything about us. Well, you know, that statement is a direct dig at me or a direct dig at my life. Well, no, the other person, or I should say, may have not even meant it that way. You know, and that's where a clarification question comes in to say, now here's what I heard you say. Is that what you meant? That's another thing that we try and teach young couples is to ask clarifying follow-up questions, because we process things so quickly in the moment that oftentimes we process it wrong. And all it takes is a little clarifying question, because I've had Christy say that to me before. Now, here's what I heard you say. Is that what you meant? And I'm like, no way. Like, I did not mean it that way. Let me think of a different way to say it. And I do, and I repackage and represent, and it's received very differently. So yeah, so I think some of the pitfalls could be just, you know, going in with too much anger or emotion or feeling and not enough logic to think you through it. And then flip side of that is, you know, going in with too much logic and not letting your emotion carry you to the right place. I visited with a young man in some mentoring time on Monday, and he was just talking about how he's really afraid to cry in our conversations. And this is a 25-year-old young man who is very successful, very smart, a very godly young man. And he said one of the reasons that he's avoided going deeper in conversations with me is because he's afraid to cry. And I said, well, why are you afraid to cry? And he said, I don't know. I just wasn't necessarily modeled for me as a kid, and I'm not sure. I feel like it shows weakness. And I said, well, what's wrong with being weak? And again, it just goes back to these models that we build up in our mind that just aren't true. And so we agreed that in our time going forward, that if he wanted to go deeper about something, that he was free to cry. And the only thing he'd get from me is, you know, a tissue if I, you know, if I needed to get up and go get him one. And that's okay, you know, and I think we need to be okay with that. We need to be okay with that emotional side. We need to be okay with the logic part. So kind of bounced around a little bit, but does that help with that question?
For sure. And that actually kind of in a different vein, but connected to what you just said about going deeper, removing the idea of us being a conversation with, you know, somebody else. I feel like what I kind of heard in that is sometimes it's going within and listening to, you know, the voice inside of us, or you've quoted scripture and going back to, you know, the truth that we know versus everything external that we're listening, like we are hearing, but not necessarily we want to take on and really listen to and apply for our lives. So can you speak to, you know, how somebody could really hone in on drowning out the noise out here and listening to, you know, their heart and their connection to God, and maybe like that type of listening? Because I think that's really
yeah, absolutely. And that's I think a great question. I think it's like I've said a few times, and you guys have mentioned too, it's just about being an active listener, you know. And maybe one way to help with that is to not go into conversations with trying to cover a checklist of 20 things, but taking that checklist of 20 things on some major topic and breaking it into much smaller. I heard some marriage advice one time that said, you know, you guys need to fight a lot more, because what this couple was doing is they were building up, and then having these huge disagreements and these huge fights, which caused a lot of damage. And the counselor was just telling this couple, instead of building things, have a lot of small conflict instead of having these big, you know, damaging conversations. back it up and have a lot of small disagreements or small discussions, and damage won't be done. In fact, the opposite happens. Many good things come out of that. For me, one thing I've noticed is, as I've studied the scripture through the years, a lot of those teachings and a lot of the way that I see, Jesus interact with people come to mind in conversations. I'll think of those things. I'll think of articles that I've read along the way, or things that mentors have said to me, or things that I've picked up in discussions, and those will come back to me in the moment. So I think if we're constantly trying to have those different inputs in our lives, people speaking into it, scripture, following God and his lead through the power of the Holy Spirit, as long as if we have those things in our life, then in the moment, that's going to guide and help lead us, in my opinion. So that's one of the thoughts I have there.
Yeah, that's great. So you're saying, like, kind of use your intuition and your collective experience, all your learnings and things over time. So it's really within you, and you can kind of call upon it in the moment. So you're not, again, you're in your heart. I mean, it really comes back to kind of coming from a place of love when you're in any type of interaction. If your objective is to build and to create, something bigger than what you entered into it with. So yeah, that's beautiful. And also heard, feel your feelings fully, guys. It's okay. This is something that, I felt kind of like numb and not emotional for the longest period of time. And what I've come to realize is I was just packing and stacking my emotions. It didn't mean that they weren't there. It's just I had buried them deep, so they were suppressed. And John, what you just spoke to, is with the couple, and then it's like it erupts into something that maybe it isn't even intended to, because there's just so much buried emotion. And for us to feel it and feel it fully and release it, I mean, that's perfectly okay. And so we do that through your thoughts, through the emotions, and get into your heart. And then the same thing, I mean, you got to come back to your heart and then release it from that space and go back through the emotions. All of basically anything that's not love is what I've come to learn, and it's really powerful to extract that from yourself and to let it go. So yeah. One thing too that we're talking about, being active, another word that comes to mind is being present, right? So do you often see that some people are bringing up things from the past that don't really apply to the present moment of the conversation, or there's a lot of anxiety and worry, and that's kind of taking them to another place? Like, how do you stay in the present moment when it comes to listening?
Well, I think one of the first things that pops into my mind is to not hold grudges. It's really easy in relationships to remember all the bad things that the person you're interacting with has done. Maybe a coworker was rude to you one day, or your partner was snappy or did something significant that required a tremendous amount of grace and forgiveness. Well, when we forgive people, it's not that we forget that what happened, but we move on from it. And there's a lot of damage that can happen in conversations and relationships when you always fall back to the bad things that you've done in the past. So if I'm in a conversation with Christy and she brings things up from 10 years ago that she said at the time that she forgave me for, I think the question is immediately, well, if you really forgave me for that, why are you holding it against me now? And so again, I just think that's a real important part of this, that if you want to, carry conversations forward and have a positive outcome, you just have to be willing to forgive people and move on, because it's not a matter of if somebody is going to hurt you or say something mean or do something bad. It's when. and you just have to accept that. And honestly, I think there's this principle in the scripture of being a person who's full of forgiveness because you need a lot of forgiveness yourself. And so what are we saying to the people around us when, we hold these grudges and we're unwilling to forgive, yet we need the grace and forgiveness that they have? You know what I mean? It's like, again, goes back to that power over thing. Well, it doesn't matter what I did or said, I'm just going to be mad about what you did or said. That's unfair. That's unreasonable. And it comes from a place of, I think, pride and haughtiness. So I just think, entering into conversations and being sure that you're not the person that's bringing up past wrongs or issues, that you're always looking at, what's going on right now and what you can do or say to help move things forward. Because if you're not moving them forward, they're probably sliding backwards, and you're going to end up in a cycle, and it's the same thing over and over again. And you really need somebody with, I just think really what maybe boils down to is the wisdom or maturity to be able to enter into a conversation and say, yeah, I was a jerk when I did that. I apologize. Will you forgive me? We even practice with our kids when they were young, not saying it's okay when somebody did something bad to them or wrong to them, like one of their siblings did something bad. The typical response is it's okay. And we're very usually pleased with that response. We actually taught them to say, I forgive you, because it takes that okay a step further to say, okay. And we even told them, like, don't say it unless you mean it. We don't want you to say this. We want you to really mean this. And then if it does come up again, we can say, well, let's go back. Did you forgive them for that thing that they did? Well, yes, I did. Okay, well then let's move on from that. Let's figure out how to take this going forward.
That's super powerful. And not holding grudges, forgiveness, and basically that just allows you the platform to start fresh in the present moment, and to kind of come into it with an open heart and open mind. And that's really the access point to being a good listener is what I'm hearing. And John, you're a wealth of knowledge and wisdom on listening, and we have a couple minutes left here, so just want to get your what's the last word that you want to give to our audience? It doesn't have to be around listening. Just share with us some of that John wisdom that we all benefit from so much. We would love to just kind of hear what do you want to say? What's on your heart?
I think if I had to kind of zoom out a little bit and speak to not just this idea of listening, but just living, engaging, in this life is be patient. I think we place a lot of pressure on ourselves and on people around us to have it all together, and sometimes we just don't. We're just not going to know what we don't know. And so, if you're somebody who's listening to this that's a 15-year-old or 18-year-old and thinking about what life is going to look like, you need to have some patience and grace for yourself and think about, okay, well, where do I feel like I'm being called or led to? How can I benefit and bless people? That's one of the things I really appreciate about the message you guys are spreading, is just this idea of genuinely caring about people. Gosh, what if just 10% of our world really had that kind of heart? Just think of the change that would happen. And I would say, if you're a 30-something listening to this, look back over the past 30 years and think about where you've been and what you've experienced, and ask those questions. Who are the people in my life that seem like they were doing well? And then go and ask them, how did you get to where you are? How do you have, my in-laws came in town last night. They've been married 60 plus years. There's a lot of wisdom there in people who have been married a long time and been able to, be in a relationship like that. If you're a 40 or 50-year-old or 60-year-old, think about what's left, what you have left to do and try to accomplish, and to carry, God's love to people. I just think that's a really powerful message. And And then, in the end, have a lot of grace for yourself. Know that you're going to mess up. Be willing to apologize quickly. A lot of people are just so afraid of apologizing, so afraid of admitting that they were wrong. It's like, no, parents need to be able to apologize to their kids. Coworkers need to be able to apologize to each other. Spouses, partners need to be able to engage in those kind of conversations and walk away feeling uplifted and like, okay, I was heard. That person realized they did something wrong. They offered an apology and, forgiving quickly. I mean, gosh, there's just, sorry to ramble, but I just think there's a lot of things like that that are just little things that that will carry us a long way in due time. So again, not feeling like, okay, I got to have all my stuff together by the time I'm 25 or whatever. It's like, no, like give yourself some time there, figure that out, follow God's lead and see where he takes you in that, and spend your life on something good. Again, something I appreciate about you guys is that you've chosen to spend your life on something that will have like a ripple effect into eternity. Well, you're doing that. You came to that decision. You identified that in your life and you're pursuing that. And I think even if people are, working in an office or driving a school bus or, whatever, that we can do all these things, whatever we're doing, in a manner that is building up people, loving people, and pleasing to God. Or we can do it our way, and it ends up probably crashing and burning. So I could probably, you're talking to a preacher, so I could probably
preach
for hours.
Preach. That was amazing.
Yeah.
That was awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you for
Yeah.
sharing your heart and pouring into so many people such a beautiful message. Really, that was amazing. I learned a lot in this conversation. So thank you very much.
Absolutely. Well, if you have any follow-up questions or anybody watching this has any questions they want to put in the comments, I'll be sure and try and jump in. And I'm certainly available for direct conversations with anybody that might have heard something that wants to follow up. And I promise I'll listen to what they have to say.
John, thank you so much. Thank you for offering that too. See, I mean, this is he's just such a great guy, and we learned so much from you. We love you dearly, and we just really appreciate you being on the Friday Fundamental Show and sharing your perspectives with us. And we're looking forward to the next time that we get to do this again and get to really receive all that wonderful wisdom that you shared. So, and we'll be right back with the Fundamental 5 on listening.
All right, it's time for the Fundamental 5. These are the 5 fundamental takeaways that we want you to have on listening. So number 5, seek first to understand and ask clarifying questions. Right? Like, don't try to be understood right off the bat, because that's going to immediately get you in your head, and it's going to get you out of what's actually going on in the conversation. So seek understanding. That means you can close your eyes and keep your mouth shut and just take it in, absorb it. And then if you kind of get lost or something gets said that you're unsure of, ask the clarifying questions. Make sure that you have a grounded understanding as you progress. That's going to help you see it from the other's perspective, and that's going to allow you to build on the conversation.
Number 4, it's more than just the words. There's so much more to a conversation than the words that are coming out of somebody's mouth. There's the body language. They're looking at, their emotions. It's the facial expressions, but it's also, when do they get really animated? What are they fighting for? Like, when are they getting really jazzed up? Or when is there, tears coming out, like showing their heart and what's really going on inside? That's an important part of listening just as much as the words that they're putting to the thoughts and feelings inside of them. And picking up on that is a huge part of being a good listener.
Number 3, a clear mind and an open heart is the access point. So when you're listening and you're listening consciously, you're not coming in already in your head, already, what you're going to say and trying to get your point across. You're coming in with an open heart. You're ready to receive what anybody else is willing to give. You're open to the possibilities, to the opportunities, and that's the platform off which many great things can happen. So the clear mind is just getting out of your head, and the open heart is being in that space.
Number 2, listen to build, not to diminish. This means you're looking for and listening to the possibilities that exist in what someone is saying. You're hearing for ways that you can build upon what they're expressing, how you can add to the conversation or even walk away with something that's new than how you entered it. Instead of the flip side, which is looking and listening to diminish, you're trying to hear what you could possibly poke holes in, or you're applying your own judgments and trying to tear somebody's what they're expressing down because you disagree with it, or you're thinking it's invalid. So as a good listener, you're always wanting to look for opportunities to build upon the conversation and really hear what they're saying.
And number 1, be present. Listening is an activity. And an activity is active. You have to be conscious, aware, paying attention, and involved, right? You're a participant. And so, when you're present to a conversation, you know that the present moment's a gift, and you know that what's inside that other person is a gift, and you want to get that gold. And so, your intent, you're seeking to, find what it is that is being shared with you. Find that gold, because that's the treasure, that's the gift, and that's the present.
And here they are, the Fundamental 5 on listening. Pull out your phones, take a picture, take a screenshot. Snappy, snappy, happy, happy.
That was the Fundamental 5 on listening, and this was the Friday Fundamentals Show, episode 3, where we dove deep on listening. Guys, that was a great episode. We certainly enjoyed sharing our perspectives with you. Hope you got a lot of perspectives of your own, and please share those in your comments. And Gracelyn, would you like to take us out, perhaps with a musical closing?
Oh, it'd be my honor. Thank you. Listen to your heart. That's all I got. That's all I got. I won't pain your ears anymore.
Well, guys, that's Gracelyn singing, and that's us doing listening on the Friday Fundamental Show. Join us on the next Friday Fundamental Show, where we're going deep on another exciting topic that you're not going to want to miss. Love y'all.